Hello, everyone. Sorry for the delay there. We got a little bit of noise going on here. We're going to get started here with our panel session. So I'm going to introduce 6 panelists today. And while I'm doing that, since we just got back from the award ceremony and lunch at the EOCP, some of us here are very into their food. And I won't call anybody out, no names, Kalpna. But if you want to put some information in the chat, if you had anything interesting for lunch, that would be fantastic while I go through these introductions. So first off, in this panel here, in disaster risk reduction, we have Kalpna Solanki. So Kalpna's been the president and CEO of the EOCP since 2016. She's passionate about the water and wastewater industry and feels fortunate to be working with a fabulous team and board of directors. Kalpna holds a Master of Business Administration and a Bachelor of Science from Simon Fraser University, and as well as a Diploma in Environmental Health from the British Columbia Institute of Technology. She also enjoys volunteering. She's currently sitting on 4 different boards and is a policy wonk. In her spare time, you'll find Kalpna outdoors paddling, cycling, or hiking with her 3 dogs, and on the slopes in the winter. Our next panelist is Sahar Safai, and she is the founder of Sage on Earth Consulting. Sahar has built a trusted network of individuals and institutions with expertise in various elements of disaster and climate risk assessment, disaster risk management, and climate change adaptation across the globe. Depending on the project requirements, a dynamic team of experts is created to work closely with the client in solving challenges with innovative solutions. Our next panelist is Megan Latimer from the District of Squamish. Megan is a senior professional program manager with extensive recent experience in challenging operational and financial climates, including operations, staff, and budget management, as well as a major donor, fundraising, and leading strategy development. She has been deployed in countries including Guatemala, Mozambique, Afghanistan, Angola, Sri Lanka, Colombia, South Sudan, Vietnam, DRC, Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, and Ukraine over the last 15 years. Our next panelist is Ben Kanashenko from the District of Squamish. And he needed to update his bio, so I have to read it off my phone. Thanks, Ben. Ben is the Technical Operations Manager for the District of Squamish Public Works Department and also a director here with the EOCP. He is a certified water and wastewater operator, an applied science technologist, and an environmental professional. Ben has a degree and diploma in environmental engineering technology and has spent almost 20 years studying, working, and volunteering in the water and wastewater and environmental fields at both the public and private organizations. Our next panelist is James Austin from the City of Abbotsford. He began his career as a water supply operator in 2001 in Ontario, eventually becoming the Director of Utilities with the City of Abbotsford in 2018. He has a bachelor's degree and college diploma in environmental sciences, ASCT designation, and holds EOCP Level 2 certification in water distribution, water treatment, and wastewater collection. And finally, we have Terra Mcrae. Terra is currently the manager of water operations with the City of Surrey, while managing one of the largest water systems in the province of BC. Terra is also a director with the EOCP Board of Directors. a subject matter expert for the ABC exam review, and is a member of Metro Vancouver's REAC Water Subcommittee. She began her career in utilities in Sun Peaks Resort 18 years ago. Terra is a certified environmental technologist, certified public works inspector, and holds certification in both water treatment and distribution. Throughout her career, Terra has worked with the City of Port Moody, Township of Langley, and the City of Abbotsford. So please welcome all of our panelists today.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, again. So this is going to be an interesting session because it's we've got people in the room, we've got people in other parts of BC, and we're going to put you to work on developing some plans. So just to give you a little bit of an outline on what we're going to do. So first of all, I'm just doing a very quick introduction. Sahar is going to give an overview of the Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience Pathways project. She'll be referring to something called the Sendai Framework, and Megan Latimer will give you an update on what the Sendai Framework entails. Sahar will then take over again for a few minutes and talk about the paper overview. Jamie and Terra, I will start off with Jamie, and then with Terra, they'll be talking about water treatment, and water distribution. And Ben is going to be talking about wastewater collection and wastewater treatment. You will then have 25 minutes to work in breakout sessions, and then we will have breakout session reporting. What I'm going to do once I'm off the podium here and hand things over to Sahar, is I'm going to put in the chat function what the responsibilities are for the breakout sessions, and also the questions, the 4 questions that the breakout sessions need to work on. And basically what we're going for here is we're working on developing emergency response plans for water-related facilities and systems and wastewater-related facilities and systems. What we found when we were looking at this information was that people were sometimes putting this, for water there was a requirement, there is a regulatory requirement, but there was a lot of working in silos. We don't really know what each organization is doing in terms of their emergency response plan. With regards to wastewater, there is no regulatory requirement. Some organizations have wastewater emergency response plans and some don't. At the end of this project, we're hoping to have some documentation that we're going to work with the people that are going to be the panelists here, and we're going to clean it up and we're going to make it available to every single utility to help them put together emergency response plans and for water and for wastewater. I would also at this point I just want to really acknowledge the work that some of the people have done, specifically Ben Kinishenko, Jamie Austin, Terra Mcrae, and Megan Latimer. About a week and a half ago, a couple of individuals dropped the ball on me with regards to this project, and I was scrambling in addition to being short-staffed at the EOCP and with this conference to plan. And those 4 individuals took the ball and they ran and they put together almost all the work related to the project. So I'm really excited about this. One of the other things I will just mention, the breakout sessions. For each of the breakout sessions, there will likely be 4 breakout sessions, 2 for water, 2 for wastewater, and you self-select which one you want to go into. When you get into your breakout session, please appoint or select a scribe to take some notes. And then when your turn comes to present to the bigger group with regards to your answers to the 4 questions, just have someone ready and willing, or maybe voluntold, to take on the responsibility to report to the larger group. And then we'll also provide a general EOCP email address. And if you could send the notes to that address, eocp@eocp.ca, but I will put it in the breakout session information as well, or in the chat function as well. And if you could just send your notes to that email address, that'd be good. When I put the information in the chat function, it would be sometimes the information isn't retained in the breakout session, so it'd be great if you could just cut and paste it onto your keyboard or onto your onto a document so that you have that information readily available. That'd be really handy. And on that note, I'm going to hand things over to Sahar.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let me start sharing. Okay, great. You should be able to see my slides now. Please give me a sign if that's not the case, otherwise I will start. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you, Kalpna and the whole team for the interest, for creating the opportunity for this workshop and joining the initiative that I'm going to talk about. So I want to give you a very brief introduction to this project, Resilient Pathways Report, which is a project of Natural Resources Canada, funded by Canadian Safety and Security Program. The original project started in 2019, and this is the last component building on all that has happened throughout the DRR Pathways project since 2019 to create this report that will be ongoing for a few years in the future. So answering the simple question of what is the Resilience Pathways Report? It will be a comprehensive collection of articles on a wide range of topics related to disaster risk reduction and building resilience. It will be written by experts, researchers, and practitioners who are active in understanding risk and building resilience in BC. We will have an ongoing rolling out process. So the series of articles will be published, will be developed in the years coming, and will be published biannually. The first release of about 10 articles will be in January 2022. As Kalpna mentioned, we are going to hear from Magda about Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. If you haven't heard about it, it's basically the sister agreement to Paris Agreement for climate mitigation and climate change mitigation and adaptation. It came to effect in 2015, and it has very close links. Basically, resilience being the common denominator between Paris Agreement, Sendai Framework, and Sustainable Development Goals, which I think there is a higher chance you have heard of them. 17 beautiful goals that 197 countries came to agreement in 2015, and it has sets of targets for 2030. It includes resilience and effective, functional, growing infrastructure, as well as this actually one dedicated goal on clean water and sanitation. So back to the Resilience Pathways Report. The objectives are to share knowledge and information about existing practices and capacities. So these articles will be very short and concise and will be developed by a group of people. But we want them to be the go-to place, the first place that a new practitioner or somebody in a new position or a researcher or a decision maker wants to start with what is going on disaster risk management, the risk, understanding risk and resilience practice for a specific topic, in this case, in water and sanitation sector. So the document includes some references and resources for further research and getting into sites and guidelines and other material that is available related to that topic. We wanted to provide guidance for the path forward for understanding risk and building resilience. And that is very timely because in BC, as many of you may know, the Emergency Program Act has been, or we are in the process of getting modernized. There's been consultations and some summary has come out, and the direction is getting shaped and moving into policy and programming next year, led by EMBC. And that impacts all different aspects of the society and different sectors. And it's a fantastic opportunity. Any input and information that comes out of this work has the opportunity to influence the policies and programs moving forward. Also, around the same time, a year and a half, 2 years ago, Government of BC adopted Sendai Framework. So again, that is influencing legislations and policies and the direction we are going within government and non-governmental entities being influenced by legislations and policies for building resilience in BC. The audience. One of the main elements that Sendai has put forward, but also EMBC with the Emergency Program Act modernization is putting forward, is the fact that the disaster risk management and building resilience is the role and the job of the whole of society. We do need to have a whole of society approach for building resilience. With that same lens, this report is aiming to talk to an audience that includes basically every practitioner, every actor in understanding risk and resilience, except directly talking to the general public. So we are using a language that is understandable not only for the experts on that topic, but also to the experts step away. So we want this piece on this article on water and sanitation to be written in a language that I, with my earthquake engineering background and generic disaster risk management expertise, be able to understand and benefit from. So practitioners and policymakers at provincial, regional, local level, researchers in technical institutions, practitioners in civil society, and risk managers in private sector. The purpose, in a sense, reiterating some of the objective, we want it to be a reference and resource that stays there for at least a few years. We believe and we hope have the ambitions to be able to do this over the years. That way, first of all, as a reference, it will get updated, but also it can be used as a monitoring process. The article identifies some gaps and challenges. So imagine if we will be able to do this another time on this topic, 3 years or 5 years from now, and see how some of the gaps that are identified this year may be tackled and managed when we look at it 3 or 5 years from now. That will be an excellent tool to see how we are having progress, and vice versa, if nothing changes in the gaps that are identified today. And we want it, in a sense, to be a platform for collective and strategic voice of the whole of society, again, the actors and practitioners, for giving their input for the path forward in building resilience. So a mechanism that allows giving voice and a channel for practitioners on the ground to share their experiences and opinions to come together in this strategic piece of article. We have all the ambitions, for obvious reasons, to incorporate indigenous vision approaches in understanding the complexities of the natural world. It's at the heart of every indigenous culture internationally, but obviously here among all the nations and communities in Canada, that the belief that everything is connected, everything is one, both physically in the physical space, but also over time. And that is at the heart of the concept of risk. On the scientific side, we have gradually moved to finally accept and agree that risk, disaster risk, is a systemic issue and needs to be tackled in a systemic way. Everything is connected, every aspect of the society, and thinking about infrastructure, the infrastructure interdependencies is at the heart of the concept of systemic risk. But also on time, the risk that we have today, the vulnerabilities that we have in our buildings, for our populations, for our infrastructure, is because of the decisions we have made in the past, when these were designed, when these were maintained or not maintained. And whatever decision we make today on however we are going to upgrade these or manage these or have contingency plans affects what we will see as the level of risk and impacts of disasters in the future. Quite ambitious list of topics we have. That's why we think we will be able to tackle it over time. So first chapter will be set in context. Second chapter will be on a wide range of hazards and the relevant risks that are affecting BC. Third chapter is on variety of core concept of disaster risk management. Examples are socioeconomic vulnerability, equity, and risk dynamic, or housing crisis and risk, emergency planning, recovery planning, and these core concepts. Chapter 4 is with that lens of whole of society approach is about the roles and responsibilities of infrastructure and stakeholders. So this is where the article on understanding risk and resilience in water and sanitation sector is sitting. This chapter also includes articles on the role of stakeholders being scientific bodies, media, civil society, and private sector. Fifth chapter will be on proposed tools and approaches to enable collaboration and connection. Collaboration and connection and bringing science and policy actors and thinkers together is at the heart of the vision for this work. After all, it's people are with agency and understanding are the ones who bring change and are the ones who enhance the practices. So with that in mind, we hope in this chapter there's a set of tools and mechanisms that through years the community have identified as essential for us to be able to work better together, such as risk data management for data sharing practices. We hope we can have articles dedicated to those issues in this chapter. And the last chapters are about emerging capabilities and special projects that maybe have been implemented as pilots, and we want to showcase it in the project, in the report, sorry. I pause now. This is supposed to give you a very quick overview, and I now pass it to Megan to talk about the Sendai Framework. If I manage to figure out how to stop sharing. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, a little technical difficulty there on my side. I'll just check that everyone can hear me okay. I don't know if you can nod your head or give me some arms in the air. I see Sahar smiling, so I'm going to take that as a yes. Thanks so much for letting me join you today. My name is Megan Latimer. I am the Emergency Program Coordinator with the District of Squamish. And I'm just going to give you a really basic overview about what the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction is, because it's going to play a pretty important role in terms of how we're putting together the articles for this project. So the Sendai Framework is essentially, it's an international agreement that provides countries that have signed on to it concrete actions to plan and protect themselves from the risk of disaster. Its overall goal is the substantial reduction of disaster risk and losses, and it outlines 4 specific priorities for reaching this objective. The first priority is about understanding disaster risk. So this is about increasing our knowledge and our understanding about what the different hazards are that impact us, which of our assets are exposed, which areas or populations might be vulnerable to hazards, and what our strengths and coping capacities are. The second priority is about strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk. And this is really looking at the capacity of people and systems. So ensuring that we're equipped at all levels of government to manage disaster risk, having the right people and systems in place so that we can adequately manage disaster risk reduction. The third priority in the framework is about investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience. So this is really focusing on prevention and mitigation. So for example, putting in place mitigation works like dikes, making sure that our new facilities are built to withstand the impacts of disasters and of climate change. The fourth and final priority is about enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response and to be able to build back better in our recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction efforts. So really focusing on that preparedness, but also that resilience aspect. And the Sendai Framework, it recognizes that national or federal governments have the primary role to reduce disaster risk, but that the responsibility should be shared with other stakeholders or other levels of government. So both provincial governments, but importantly for us, local governments, municipalities, as well as the private sector and civil society as well have a role to play. So I just want to put it into the context of, the sectors that we have here today, the water, wastewater treatment sectors, public works, and just talk a little bit about how the Sendai Framework applies to those sectors. So the Sendai Framework identifies the resilience of critical infrastructure as a key component for disaster risk reduction. So this is really important, and this is where it impacts all of us here. There's 7 accountability targets that are outlined in the Sendai Framework, including one that's directly relevant for our sector, which is to substantially reduce damage to critical infrastructure and services disruption. So I just really wanted to highlight that one because I think it speaks to everybody who's at this session today. I also wanted to touch on the link between the Sendai Framework and climate change, which Sahar also mentioned as well. And I want to emphasize here that climate change, it's a driver of disaster risk. So we know that changes in climate are going to continue. And in many cases, they're going to intensify or get worse over the coming decades, which is going to increase our disaster risk. So things like higher temperatures, shifting rainfall patterns, extreme weather events, rising sea levels, these are just some of the changes that are already affecting many of our communities and many of our lives. I've just put a few stats on this slide to give you an idea of some of the predicted impacts of climate change that we're expecting here in Canada. And these are based on 2 different scenarios that the Government of Canada has run. So looking at a high emission scenario, which is the orange indicators, and a low emissions scenario, so a best case scenario with the green or the turquoise colored indicators there. So you can see there's pretty devastating impacts with either a low or a high impact emission scenario for both temperatures as well as precipitation over the next 100 years is what this is modeled on. And, climate change, it really places an additional burden on our critical infrastructure assets. So, for example, droughts and extreme weather affect our water supply systems. And to put this in context a little bit more, in Canada, nearly 2/3 of our core public infrastructure is owned and maintained by municipal governments. And over 1/3 of that is in need of retrofit or replacement due to being in very poor condition. So some pretty concerning figures there. And with rising temperatures, changing hydrological conditions, and more frequent extreme weather events, we're going to see an increased risk of failure of those assets, which makes it really difficult to deliver optimal levels of service across the entire lifespan of our existing and our new infrastructure assets. So I don't want to leave you hanging on that negative note. I'm gonna pass you on to our next speakers, who are going to talk to you a little bit more about some of the things that are being done to improve things and to meet these challenges.
So actually, Megan, thank you so much. Before we pass it on to other colleagues, I have a couple of other slides. Like, it will take just 2 minutes to give an overview of what the content of the article, the design of the article will be, and what is the process that we are proposing for developing the articles. If I may one more time share my screen. Okay. So very quickly, to give you a better sense of how these articles look like and what is the process that we are proposing. So for the case of the articles in Chapter 4, including understanding risk and resilience in water and sanitation sector, these are the set of the objectives we want from the article: to provide a high-level overview of hazards, threats, vulnerabilities, and risks that are affecting the sector, and the availability of data and information on hazards and vulnerabilities and risk. Provide an overview of the practice of managing disaster and climate risk in this sector, including roles and responsibilities of different parts of the government, different levels of the government, available policies, legislations, and resources. Providing insight on how effectively hazard and risk information is used in this sector for risk management. because we see it all around in all sectors, in all policy spaces, that sometimes hazard and risk information is actually available, risk assessments are done, but information is not necessarily effectively used for risk management. And the last objective is to provide strategic insights on gaps and recommendations for enhancing understanding risk and enhancing doing risk management, including both emergency preparedness, response, and recovery, but also longer term investments in reducing risk and building a more resilient future for the sector. So based on those objectives, we have created a template which has been shared with the team, which includes a series of questions for starting from giving a background and asking for that background of what is the current practice, what is the current status of understanding risk and risk management, and then moving into looking into the future, looking at the gaps and challenges, and coming up with set of recommendations. We really want the work to be a collaborative approach, especially between variety of type of practitioners, but also scientific entities and research and technical institutions. Normally we have co-lead authors and conveners. In this case, I think we have Megan, Ben, and Kalpna who have been convening, and Megan and Ben so far have taken the lead in basically co-authoring. But very important component of the process is a panel of reviewers, which also, again, the team has been fantastic in so far convening few other colleagues across different institutions to join in to bring their brains, because especially when it comes to the challenges and gaps, priority recommendations, we want this to come from a wide range of diverse group of experts with different experiences and backgrounds. Different tools are recommended to be used for getting input from even a wider group of people through questionnaires or workshops, which is why we are here today, and we hope to really get the best out of the 25 minutes to hear from you on the challenges you have faced and the recommendations you would have and you think are priorities for enhancing the practice. Thank you. I stop sharing and pass it on to the next speaker.
Okay, so I'm just going to take over for a few seconds here. And I just wanted to alert you that what the group, Jamie and Terra and Ben, have done is they've actually, in a way, simplified the process with 4 questions, because we don't have a lot of time together on this. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Jamie, who is going to give an overview with regards to the component that he's been working on. And Jamie, if you could, when you're done, hand the baton over to Terra, and then when Terra's done, if you could hand over to Ben, and then Ben back to me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We'll just get started here. Slowly get started here, I should say. Okay, I think I should be up. Can everybody see my screen right now? Hoping so. Okay, almost there. Thank you for bearing with me. I guess while I wait for this thing to fire up, I just wanted to thank Sahar and Megan for introducing me, and as well to Kalpna for inviting me to present here to the group. Okay, I've done this right. Everybody's seen my presentation now. So as mentioned, I'm Jamie Austin. I'm the director for the utilities operations with City of Abbotsford. Today, though, I'm presenting on behalf of the Abbotsford Mission Water and Sewer Commission. The AMWSC owns the supply and transmission systems that supply both Abbotsford and Mission. The operator of those systems, though, is the City of Abbotsford, who I work for. So today's discussion will specifically look at water supply resiliency, things we're doing now within the Commission, and things we're working on in the future as well. Once I'm done, I'll pass it over to Terra, who will look specifically at distribution systems. So a bit of an overview on our supply system, kind of a cartoon drawing here, but you can see we're comprised of, I'll go over 3 different supply sources we manage here. First off, we have our Norrish water treatment plant. There's a picture of it on the entry on the first screen there. Just above it is Dixon Lake. So Dixon Lake is one of the main suppliers to Norrish Creek. We then take water from Norrish Creek and run it through a series of sand filters. We have 4 large sand filters. We also have a membrane plant at that location, giving us a total production of 144 megaliters as a maximum. Next is our Canal water treatment plant. This takes water directly out of Canal Lake. UV disinfection is utilized there. We have a filtration exemption as well within this facility, and it produces about 69 megaliters. And then finally, to the south of the city, we have a series of 14 wells. They all utilize on-site hydro generation, and combined they produce about 55 megaliters. So looking at the potential hazards within our system, there they are. I've grouped them kind of by color to reflect similarities. So water quality stands alone, as does pandemic, climate change, coastal and creek floods, and droughts. So I kind of grouped as one. Forest fire, volcanic eruptions as another, and then finally earthquake, landslides, and dam failure. So to begin with the AMWSC, how do we prepare for emergencies? Like most water systems, we have an emergency response manual. It's actually right here. It's pretty big. It weighs about 5 pounds, and that's double-sided copy. So it's quite a large document. It is ultimately designed to deal with immediate emergencies and conditions as they change in the field. Its primary goal is to provide a process to allow us to assess, respond, and recover from emergencies. So the binder I just showed you, it covers 51 different scenarios, all of which are touched upon by the previous hazards I've listed. The emergency response manual is kind of the first step as far as how we tackle emergencies as they come up. Usually, if it gets beyond just an operational capability, we'll have an establishment of our Emergency Operations Center, or EOC. And it really drives the response actions, and it functions by bringing in people and resources from across the community, such as those that I have listed, our Public Health Officer, Emergency Services, Emergency Management BC as well. So first, how do we look at water quality? So at the moment, things we're focusing on now, that's a picture of Canal Lake. It's one of the ones that we have an increased monitoring program on. So as far as quality of water, we have very soft water. It's about 75% surface water supplied. And as such, we do have concerns about alkalinity and pH. So right now we're doing a study to look at that, primarily to ensure we've got stable chlorine residuals, as well as any legacy deposits that may slough off within the mains or become resuspended. As far as the lakes, we do have an increased sampling program to help us understand changing quality within the lake, and how those changes can potentially impact our treatment systems, and as well as how we notify the public. You know, examples might be if we had a blue-green algae outbreak, microcystin would be the one of concern there. Future work as well, the picture below, that's our Norrish water treatment plant. We're going through a lot of membrane work there. The system, I think we're about 10 years old, so we're getting to the point where we're having to do a lot of membrane renewal work. And then to the bottom of Abbotsford, where I showed you the wells, we've got a lot of replacement work going on there as well. So we're looking at securing not only treatment systems, but also the quality of the water coming into those systems. The next one I had is pandemic. There's really not a whole lot to say. We're kind of living this right now. One of the reasons why I'm talking to you from my office. As far as what we're doing, probably like everyone else, we're just continually reviewing our plans, refining them also. So there's not much for me to say that people don't already know. The only thing I did want to add on this is that list, I felt it was missing something very important, so I added my own, just to thank you all utility operators out there. Next topic is climate change, flood, and drought. So like most municipalities, we have staged watering bans, and they're driven primarily off of our reservoir levels. We also have a pretty robust diking system to help protect us from rising levels in the Fraser River. However, there is discussions about actually raising those dikes further as climate change has more of an impact and we see water levels rising. Future things we're looking at, right now we're in the early throes of finding a new supply source. So collectively, we're at probably about 250, 260 megaliters. We're looking at finding an additional source of 50 megaliters. So right now we have 2 surface plants that do the bulk of the work for us. The issue is though, if something large scale happened and both of those reservoirs became unavailable, we then have to rely on 55 megaliters from our wells, which is not enough. So we're trying to find a well source, which ultimately would be along the banks of the Fraser. As well, there's extreme weather response plans. That's specific to kind of this last summer. It's very bizarre that the large heat dome that landed over BC. We found that our watering ban restrictions didn't really address what we do if we had either intense heat, periods of no rain, or lots of heat, where we had just so much demand on the system we couldn't keep up. So coming up this year, we're going to be doing some reviews on not just relying on the watering ban based on reservoir levels to determine what we do as far as the response, but also, you know, maybe we have extended periods of heat or drought that would put us into a temporary or maybe a shorter term response plan. And then finally, I popped up Norwich Creek here as far as what we're doing. So what you see on the screen right now is a picture of our intake. So that red circle, that is our intake. That's the point of the screen that pulls in water for, you know, the 60% of the entire population around here. This is after the January 31st, I think it was 2020 rainstorm. The thing was completely buried. This is the picture afterward. There's the same device, the same intake. You can see how much different that looks. And that was just from one extreme rain event. And the bill for that was about $200,000. So this is something we're not really interested in doing on a regular basis. So we're looking at working on removal of a downstream weir to get this kind of blockage out that will help debris to travel down the river, or sorry, down the creek instead of plugging up at our intake. Forest fires and volcanoes. So this pretty picture here in the top corner there, that's kind of what you see as you come into Abbotsford, and I work just a little bit from that location, the Clearbrook exit. Mount Baker is an active volcano. It's beautiful to look at, but it is an active volcano. And below that, I just took a clip of, you know, kind of midsummer, what the forest fires were like. As far as what we can do for that, we've got things within the emergency response plan, but these are things that we can't really curb or prevent based on our own action. So we do have emergency response ideas on what we do or try to handle it. As far as future things that we're looking at doing to deal with the impacts of that, again, if we had a big ash cloud come from Baker, we could potentially lose both of our lakes. Again, that's about, you know, 60 to 75% of our supply. If we were able to get this the well system, that would be enough with water restrictions to probably keep the system running even in the highest summer. As well, something minor we're looking at doing is, you know, we are within a couple watersheds, we're looking at limiting access during times of extended drought or heat, basically preventing people from going up forest service roads in the summer and potentially starting forest fires. So next one, earthquake, landslide, and dam failure. Right now, anything new we build, probably like everyone else, is built to post-disaster code as far as earthquakes go. We also do an annual helicopter inspection of both of our watersheds to look for anything like landslides or things of concern within the lakes themselves. So here's a picture of one of our dams, actually. Sort of like, because, I don't know, I moved here from Ontario 3 years ago, and I thought dams were these gigantic structures, but apparently they can be these smaller ones too, equally as important though. Within both of our dams, we have one at Canal Lake and we also have one at Dixon Lake. And we've been looking at those as far as seismic improvements to help deal with pending earthquakes. So that spend a lot of money and time on those. We're also doing seismic review of our existing facility and looking at what kind of improvements we can do, the ones that are already there. And also, this is a picture, I think it was Dixon Lake. The circle, that's what a landslide looks like. You know, it's small, but we're keeping an eye on those. And as well, we're looking at putting a study forward just to look at the deactivated service roads that are in the area, because we have found at least one of them has let go and created a slide in one of our lakes. So that kind of wraps up the hazards and what we're doing now and what we're hoping to do in the future. But as far as weaknesses and opportunities, from a director's perspective, a lot of these things I spoke about, they cost a lot of money. For example, the expansion, the well system we're looking at, Prudence at the Fraser, that's north of $70 million. You know, we checked the couch cushions at City Hall, and unfortunately, we just don't have that much money. As a municipality, we're grateful for whatever grants we can get from the province and federal as well. And often those are what we rely on to pay for these large projects. But grants are issued based on how many people apply and what those needs are. As a municipality, it makes it very difficult to plan on how to pay for these upgrades. So it'd be nice if we could have a dedicated funding source that we could always count on to some degree. Emergency response plans, those who have them for water systems, the challenge I find with them is trying to keep them alive as a document that's constantly updated. You know, the big sucker I showed you earlier, that was made about 10 years ago, and just to keep on top of the regular updates, it's very daunting, and it'd be nice to have a better system to make sure that thing is always up to date. And then also mutual aid agreements, something that should be explored by municipalities who are neighbors and who can help one another. And that actually wraps up my my presentation. I'll just stop sharing my screen and I'll pass it over to Terra. We'll say goodbye for now. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
I'm hoping everyone can hear me. My computer just froze briefly for a second there. Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me? We good? Okay, all right. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I'm Terra Mcrae. I'm with the City of Surrey, Water Operations Manager. So my brief presentation here is going to cover water distribution system disaster risk reduction. So in this brief presentation, I'll outline how the City of Surrey is working towards reducing our risks by building a more resilient community. Water distribution system, just in brief, we have just under 1,900 kilometers of pipe. 95,000 service connections, 38 pressure zones, 9 pump stations, 75,000 water meters. So we're the largest water system geographically in the province, and we have one of the largest water meter programs in the province. We're a Class 3 system, and with the City of Surrey, we have approximately 75 staff that are responsible for the water distribution system, and that's really comprised of 2 departments, so it's water operations and then our pumps and controls department as well. We have a budget of approximately 12 million. And we supply water to Samiamo First Nations and emergency fire flows to the city of White Rock. We receive our entire water supply from Metro Vancouver Regional District. So that's a pretty common thing here in the lower mainland, but it's also unique in the province that there's several municipalities that get their water supply from one supplier. So City of Surrey emergency preparation. What have we done? So we have completed a hazard risk and vulnerability assessment. So our HRVA, it helps us understand our disaster risks and looking at the likelihood and consequence of those risks. We have an emergency response and recovery plan. We have a joint municipal regional disaster debris management operational plan, a coastal flood adaptation strategy, and a seismic vulnerability assessment. So this just highlights some of the work that's been completed. We also participate and work closely with IPREM, which is an integrated partnership for regional emergency management, and that's also through Metro Vancouver. So potential hazards, you'll see that these are all very similar to what Jamie showed on his slides. Climate change, earthquakes, tsunamis, coastal and river flooding, debris flows, drought, pandemic, volcanic eruption. Some of the other things that we have identified in our ERP as a potential risks, airplane crashes, motor vehicle accidents. We live through most of those frequently. Hazardous waste spills, extreme weather, so ice storms, windstorms. And typically, most of our operators are responding to emergencies every day. And when you boil it down, our sole purpose is to provide continuity of service to all of our residents. So that's as a water or wastewater operator. So this picture, sorry, the picture's a little bit skewed, but it does show the seismic areas that we're anticipating some issues with in the City of Surrey. So the dark red is high to very high risk. The lower red is moderate. So you can see that there's a significant portion of our system that could be impacted by a seismic event. So City of Surrey water system risk reduction strategy. So this is just sort of a list of some of the things that we have in place. So as mentioned, we have an emergency preparedness program. We have a water continuity response plan. We're one of the few communities here in the lower mainland that's completed a seismic vulnerability assessment. We've identified critical infrastructure. We have an asset management program. We have supplementary specifications and design criteria, and we have design criteria specific to our seismic areas. Of course, we have water main replacement programs, and we have a valve exercising program. So the seismic vulnerability assessment, this was just completed in 2019. Prior to that, we had one done in 1999. Out of the more recent assessment, it resulted in 4 technical memos. So, and those memos covered everything from performance goals, a water system report, seismic design criteria, and mitigation strategies for specific areas. So what is our most critical system component? So I've outlined all the strategies that the City of Surrey has in place to reduce our risks, but what is our most critical water system component? What should we be focused on when it comes to protecting our water systems and being prepared for an emergency or disaster? So in one word, operators. It's our trained operators and water and sewer operators that really are the most critical piece of us being able to respond to a disaster. We can have all the plans in the world, but if we don't have trained operators, we won't be able to respond and recover from a disaster. Operators are truly at the heart of disaster risk reduction, disaster response, and recovery. So in saying that, in local government, so many of our plans are created at City Hall, developed and housed in engineering, not necessarily in operations. So how many of us are training our operators on our emergency response plans? How many of us? How many of us are? Sorry about that. It seems like I skipped a slide there. So how many of us are training our operators on our emergency response plans? How many operators have emergency management training? And who has done an actual desktop exercise of their emergency response plan? So what have we done? So in Surrey, because of the pandemic, we were forced to take a closer look at our essential services. So water and sewer were identified as essential. Interesting, or I found it interesting, that we should have all of these plans, but hadn't actually identified our essential services. Of course, water and sewer was quickly identified as an essential service. And we were able to identify that we needed a minimum of 15 trained staff to maintain our system. So what we were concerned with in the pandemic is what if we had to self-isolate or lost all of our crew to illness? How many people did we need? And what were people trained on? So we identified essential tasks. We conducted a skills survey for our water operations staff. We need to find out who had what experience. In a larger department, people tend to become more siloed and only have experience in certain things. So we have staff that understand how to maintain fire hydrants, but they may not have been on a water main repair crew, and vice versa. So we had to take a sort of a closer look at that. And as a result, we've implemented some changes in how we manage our crews, and we're trying to get some cross-training underway so that we have a bit more redundancy within our group. So some other things that we also did was we put through our supervisors through emergency management training. We did that through the JI Institute. We recently participated in a regional desktop exercise, and we're participating in active discussions through IPREM and Metro Vancouver to discussions regarding prioritizing and identifying points of distribution for potable water should we lose some of our transmission mains. So in the end, I would just like to leave you guys with a few thoughts. So are you prepared as a utility? Water and sewer operators will be expected to respond in an emergency, but if their own families are not prepared, it may be difficult for them to respond. Do your operators live locally? Will they be able to get to work if we do have a major disaster? And what is your organization doing to ensure they have staff ready to respond in the event of an emergency? So that's the end of my presentation. We'll turn it over to Ben.
Thank you, Tara. We've got this audio-visual thing moving quite smoothly now. It's nice to see, for sure. So my name is Ben Konashenko. I'm the Technical Operations Manager for the District of Squamish. And we're going to finish out the utility start-to-finish stream here with wastewater coverage. Just talk to you a little bit about what we've done around resiliency in Squamish. The District of Squamish had a 2020 population of just under 23,000 people. We're growing rapidly, and our infrastructure is, we're struggling to keep up with our infrastructure. The average day flow for our collection system and plant is 8.67 million liters per day, and our peak wet weather flow is 16.5 million liters per day. Oh, and I do not have the slide advanced button. Oh, found it. Thank you. There we go. An overview of the collection system. So it's a sanitary collection system, not we don't have any combined storm system, although we do have some I&I, as most systems do. We've got 24 lift stations, 126 kilometers of sewer main, 85% of that is PVC pipe, and our average pipe age is about 33 years. I'll show it on an upcoming slide, but it is worthwhile to mention that the majority of our collection system is located on a floodplain in liquefiable soils. The wastewater treatment plant is a Class 3 modified secondary facility. It was constructed originally in 1974. We've had multiple upgrades since then, every kind of 5-10 years, it seems like, and there's no end to that in sight. We've got fine screening, followed by vortex grit separators, no primary clarifiers presently. That flows straight into an activated sludge train, followed by secondary clarification, UV disinfection, and then transmission and outfall to the Squamish River. So hazards we've identified that apply to our sewer utility are very similar to those that Jamie and Terra identified. So I won't run through all of them. I'm going to highlight the flood and debris flow hazards and earthquake hazards. But the asterisks you see on this list kind of roll back to what Megan was saying about climate change. And these are hazards we expect to intensify with climate change over time. I was quite surprised personally about the pandemic one. And I'll let Megan, you can ask Megan why that is if you ever get a chance. So some of the work we've done around emergency preparedness, or rather the district has done, I can't take credit for all of this. We have an all hazards plan, so that's kind of identified at a high level the hazards that could impact our community. And we've started developing plans to deal with all of them. We've also done a community risk assessment, wildfire protection plan, an integrated flood hazard management plan. And specifically for the COVID pandemic, we actually entered into a mutual aid agreement with Lions Bay, District of Squamish, Resort Municipality of Whistler, and the Village of Pemberton. One note that was pointed out to me is that mutual aid agreements may not be appropriate for every type of hazard. There can be financial implications for the assisting municipality because current provincial regulations don't allow necessarily for financial recoveries. So you just have to be careful if you're drafting those agreements. So speaking of flood and debris flow hazard, this is a graphic from our OCP. We've done some, or our engineering department has done considerable work around flood hazard. You can see the red area indicating severe debris flow issues. We've got there's a natural barrier above Daisy Lake in Garibaldi Provincial Park that's kind of identified as a weak point that could potentially fail and cause debris flow and flood. Also there's a barrier on the Chikai that's on just below Garibaldi Mountain and Atwell Mountain that's significant debris flow hazard as well. And then there's the Squamish and Mamquam rivers that are prone to flood, and you know there's plenty of examples of that. The most recent one being 2003, when the floodwaters were about a foot from the top of the Squamish River Dike, and then we've got the wastewater treatment plant right at the confluence of the Mamquam and Squamish rivers. So you know, from a hazard perspective, not the greatest placement, but as we all know, that we need to get that the flow moving downhill. So this is an excerpt from our integrated flood hazard management plan. During the 200-year return flood, it will be very dangerous for anyone caught in the floodplain, even trained emergency responders. Economic damages could exceed $450 million. Keep in mind that's for a community of less than 30,000. And nearly 60% of the community's residents could be displaced. The loss of municipal facilities like fire halls, pump stations, and wastewater treatment plants would create widespread hardship. And then the other kind of major event that we're concerned about and are preparing for is earthquake. As I mentioned, a large majority of the community is located in the floodplain, and we've identified these as liquefiable soils, and some of them highly liquefiable. Again, the location of the wastewater treatment plant in highly liquefiable soils area. And we've been doing some work on this recently through some pre-design we've done for upgrading of the wastewater treatment plant. And it was really interesting to go through this exercise because it identified specific unit processes at our wastewater treatment plant that are more susceptible to the earthquake hazard than the differential settlement associated with liquefaction. So essentially, the arrows here are kind of indicating generally the direction that the whole treatment plant is going to want to slide in the event of a major earthquake. So the whole thing wants to kind of migrate towards the Namquam River here. Keep in mind there's a 4-meter dike between us and the river, and then we've also got a couple of force mains that are on bridges that are not seismically protected as well that we expect could be damaged in the event of an earthquake. So just a couple of tables. We've identified what processes have high risk, moderate risk, and low risk. Kind of makes sense, but a lot of our older buildings and processes are more susceptible to liquefaction risk. And as just an example of how susceptible they could be or what that might look like is, for example, our headworks building, it's kind of, one end of the building is built quite deep and the other end is quite shallow because it used to be an influent pump station that got converted into a headworks building. So the deep parts are expected to migrate between 25 and 75 millimeters, but the shallower parts could migrate up to 12 to 17 centimeters. Sorry, so that's settlement. And then when you look at migration, you could also, the whole thing could migrate kind of 20 to 40 centimeters. So you've got this building that could sink more on one end and twist and move. You don't really know what's going to happen, but it definitely displays the level of risk involved, and you know, you can imagine the amount of work it would take to recover from something like that. So specific work we've done to address some of these challenges. We have an asset management plan from 2010, which we're in the process of redeveloping currently. We've got a liquid waste management plan, sewer master plan. We do annual sewer system condition inspection and capital repair and replacement. We invest kind of 1% to 2% a year of our total system value back into the system, which is a start. We've done lift station condition assessments. We're doing some capital upgrades to fix up our lift stations. And then what we've got on the books for the future is a wastewater treatment plant master plan, which will help us lay out how we can upgrade the plant to create more resiliency. This is a draft diagram of what we could potentially do to help reduce our risk at the wastewater treatment plant. So we're having to build additional capacity at the plant just due to community growth, but we're also looking at how can we upgrade the plant to the point where it will be more resilient in the event of a disaster. So this is very draft, but it just shows kind of a general overview. We're looking at possible replacement of our administration building, the main MCC room, the blowers building, adding new primary clarifiers, adding additional biological trains, new dewatering facilities, all built to post-disaster standards, which if anybody knows that's built anything recently to post-disaster standards, they're extensive and it's extremely costly. So this is looking out to about 2070. Areas of weakness and opportunity. just in the redundancy and the resiliency of our infrastructure. As with most communities in British Columbia, we have a lot of aging pipes, pumps, and equipment. We're working on replacing that, but more work needs to be done. We don't have detailed emergency response and recovery plans for our wastewater collection and treatment systems, so that's something we need to address. Working on detailed interagency role identification and definition, just knowing who does what in the event of an emergency, who to call, who has training, and who can you reach out to. And then stronger mutual aid agreements. You know, it'd be really nice to be, we know we can reach out to our counterparts, but it'd be nice to have the financial backing to make it more of a realistic opportunity. And that's it for me, Kalpin. I don't know if you want to mention the breakout rooms, or are we just going to go there now? Okay.
Thank you very much, Ben. So we're just running a few minutes behind schedule. It's actually not that bad considering we were late with a few things earlier this morning. So there are going to be 4 breakout rooms, and 2 for water, 2 for wastewater. And I've put the instructions again in the chat function. And what I just encourage you to do was just cut and paste that information onto your desktop or a Word document so you have it there just in case you cannot see the chat area anymore. And because it's water and wastewater, we're not putting you into the different rooms, because the last thing we want to do is take a guess and put you in wastewater, but you actually hold water tickets. So we'll leave it to you to go into the areas. And the only thing we ask for is that if you could be ready to report back around 2:45, and if your scribe could take notes, and all the instructions are there in the in the chat. So we'll get back together in about 2:45. Thank you very much.